This week on Behind the Pulpit, Pastor Bob and Pastor Dave are joined by our youth pastor, Johnny Graves, who break down this past weekend's youth fall retreat.
This weekend in particular was really special. Some incredible moments. We've never truly experienced anything like that, and how the Spirit was moving.
I offer up a fun, interesting news story to discuss.
Recently, there was a man who tried to bring his emotional support alligator into a Phillies game.
Oh, okay.
His name is Wally the Alligator.
And we break down Pastor Bob's Sunday sermon and tackle a theology sprint on the Trinity.
God, in essence, in the whatness, is one in essence, but in person, God is three.
Wherever you may be watching or listening to this today, we hope you're having a wonderful day. And as usual, sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's edition of Behind the Pulpit.
Hey, welcome everybody to our edition of Behind the Pulpit. Here we are, November 13th, 2023. The weather has officially turned to a little bit of a bitter fall. I think it was in the 20s this morning at my house. I'm Dave Henschel here with my colleagues to my right.
Johnny Graves.
Bob Erbig. Is that what we're calling it now? The bitter fall? Are you just bitter because it's cold now?
You know, I like the fall, but sometimes the cold can be a little bitter.
We're bitter.
Convincing.
We're bitter.
I should have brought my coat today, and as I was walking across the parking lot, I realized I forgot. So it's time to start remembering your coat when you
as
come
you
to
were
work.
walking, wondering whether you were going to
Frost
die
on the
of
grass.
hypothermia as you were entering the building.
Yeah. So
Well, glad you made it here. You look less purple than you did before.
Yep, I'm warmed up. So, hey, we got a couple things going on besides the cold here in the life of Millington Baptist Church. It's the holiday season, so hopefully you're figuring out where to buy your holiday turkey. And we're coming up on the month of December, which is we're going to have some Advent activities happening here in Millington Baptist Church. The first thing to let you guys know about is we are starting a brand new series on the Gospel of Luke. We're going to be starting that at the beginning of December, and that's
Save
going
the
to
world,
be
man.
going not just through Advent, just to clarify any misunderstandings. That's going to go through the whole Gospel of Luke all the way through
Not in December.
till
all the way
like
through.
July.
Yeah.
So we're just going to be hanging out in a gospel. I'm super excited about studying the life of Christ together.
I am too.
Can't wait.
It's going to
The
be
Son of Man came to seek and save
Yeah.
that which was lost.
But it will be a great way to kick off Advent and all of those themes. So we got a lot of stuff going on for the month of December, Christmas activities. We have our annual Winter Village celebration
back.
coming up.
It's back.
And we're looking
Can't
forward
escape
to fire
New
pits.
date, new time.
Yep, we're doing that on a Sunday this year, Sunday, December 17th, 5 p.m. But back by popular demand, we're going to have our fire pits, photo booth with snow. We're going to have some carolers. We're going to have a coffee house. It's a great time to come with the family.
The snow
and-
machine is currently broken, so we're not sure if there will be snow. We're hoping. We're praying. Rachel will be happy if there's not.
Well, we learned how to pray yesterday.
That's
so,
right. And we'll talk about how to make a right petition with a right heart
Yes.
today
Yeah.
before the snowy photo booth.
So that's coming up soon. Real quick, if you guys wanted to see the raw footage of the underground sessions that occurred last weekend, we want to make that available soon. Is that right, Pastor Bob?
It's going to be attached to this email, right, Tim? Yes, that's right. It will be attached to this email, and then we'll get an edited
so.
version out pretty soon.
Just put it on my to-do list.
just update it.
I guess we're locking that in.
People want to know. They want to know what happened. What happened? And the video will not be AI generated. It'll be real.
Absolutely.
I can vouch for it. I was there.
Yeah, so check that out. That was a lot to process that one Saturday night. It's worth watching again. So that's available. We have on our show our dear brother and colleague Johnny Graves today, who
Yes, sir.
is
Excited to be
awake
here.
and
Beloved.
still alive. You
Beloved.
survived. What was going on
Awake
in
and
your
alive.
world this weekend, Johnny?
Take some melatonin last night to help you sleep, reset.
I was able to sleep real well last night.
I'll bet. Back to your own bed.
Yes.
What happened this weekend?
Oh, man, it was an incredible weekend. A couple times a year, we take our teens on retreats, and our fall retreat was this past weekend. We went to Camp Orchard Hill in Dallas, Pennsylvania. There is such a place.
Threw you off there
Such
for
a place.
second, didn't he? He threw you off.
A couple hours away. In
Is
the
there a
beautiful-
seminary? There's the PA DTS, Dallas
Oh,
Theological
yeah,
Seminary
right.
of-
That'd be cool.
Dallas
Took
PA.
a second.
Sorry.
The Cowboys did win yesterday. Just kind of say that for all you Giants fans out there. It was a glorious evening. Touchdown after touchdown
Oh,
after
no.
touchdown after
Oh, no.
touchdown.
People are logging off of YouTube right now as you say that.
Nothing to be excited about.
It's America's team.
All right, calm down. Let him finish. Let him finish.
This retreat
Anyway.
is going to go into a debate over
In more
is
spiritual
Dak
news.
Prescott a Super Bowl winning quarterback, but we won't go there.
Yeah.
So the youth retreat was, really a great experience. Always fun. Always lots to praise God about. But this weekend in particular was really special. Some incredible moments. We've never truly experienced anything like that, and how the Spirit was moving. And typically we're there all weekend, Friday night, Sunday afternoon, and we'll have lots of sessions. We typically call them. So we'll have time of maybe hosting a game or two. Our man Tim and his brother Ben have a very fun time doing some games and some stuff like that with the leaders and the kids and everything. And then we move into a time of worship. We have our speaker. Our speaker was John Cianello this weekend. He was amazing. And then our worship leaders were my brother-in-law Matt and his wife Grace, who love worshiping the Lord. They love leading people into the presence of God and just being in awe of who He is. And yeah, it was special. I mean, we really just captured God's glory. I think well and through the word being preached and our times of worship. And I mean, to a point where, and I get we're away for a weekend, you're disconnected. We take people's the kids' phones away so they can really remove the distractions. There's no homework. I said that Friday night, like the first thing I said.
After the weeping and gnashing of teeth,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
a detox
Yeah,
of
yeah.
technology.
Yeah, so I was like, listen, you don't have your phones. You don't have any homework you need to do this weekend. Like, you're here. You can really disconnect. So I get there's an aspect of that that's hard to duplicate, during the week, on a Sunday, on a Wednesday after school, whatever it is. But the worship, I mean, these kids were just fully locked in, fully directing their attention on the Lord. And, we're turning into quite a charismatic youth group. I mean, we get kids up and jumping. Our hands are held high, praising the Lord. We read that in Nehemiah, actually, a couple weeks ago, right? It says that their hands were lifted high when they were praising the Lord. And we were doing that. It was really cool to see middle schoolers, high schoolers all coming together, worshiping the Lord. And even Saturday night, we had some spontaneous worship, which was, I think, one of an incredible experience everyone got to witness. We had like a 3-4 hour session of worship, a longer message, and then a couple hours of worship after that, to a point where
Dude, it's like Nehemiah 9.
Yeah.
You're going to tie right into the sermon right there.
it was incredible. Students were just walking up to each other, praying over each other, even to a point of bowing down. The worship leader, Grace, so he's like, you know what? There's no rules here when you worship. You don't have to stand there, read every word off the screen, and do that. If you want to sit and worship, you want to stand and worship, you want to pray over one another during that, you want to bow down before your Creator. And all that was taking place, which was really cool to see that, to a point where one of the songs called Yeshua, some pronounce it Yeshua, for the name of Jesus. I think in Hebrew, Aramaic or Hebrew, one of those two. An incredible song, and we were all on our knees, bowing down before the Lord, and we were all singing it together. And it was just an incredible night where we were all just looking at each other. A lot of the adults are just like, wow, this is powerful. This is moving. Like, what is happening? So, yeah, it was...
Oh, I've heard that song. It's
heard
the
it?
one that says Baruch Hana something Adonai. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord in Hebrew, right?
That's not the lyrics of the song we sang.
Oh, that's not it.
But we sang Yeshua.
Sorry, you're way off, Dave. Way off.
It was called Yeshua.
There's multiple versions or different
Okay,
songs called Yeshua, yeah.
gotcha.
We must have sang a different one. So that was an incredible moving night for all these kids, and they love it. They love worshiping. Typically these weekends are full of a lot more times over games and free time and such, but these kids were like just staying. They just stay. We worship and they just stay, and they're like, we want more. So it was really, really special to be a part of that. I feel very blessed to be able to be a part of this group and to witness that. And even all the leaders, like I just came home yesterday. Typically I'm like wiped, and physically I was wiped, but I just came home really encouraged, built up, and blessed to have
Different kind of
done
tired.
that. Yes.
So I think Johnny had brought some pictures. Are we allowed to?
Yeah.
Show
Well,
some of
those will be popped up.
Yeah. So take a
So
look
you'll
at.
see those.
Yeah,
They-
Tim's going to have edited those pictures over top of.
Oh, okay.
talking,
most of
so
most of
you
the
probably
audience would
already
have seen
saw.
them already. Yeah.
So
There
go
you
back, rewind,
Yes.
go back about 2 minutes, and you'll see all the pictures.
Right.
Yeah, that's an exciting weekend. I
It
know
was.
my daughter Felicity got home last night. She was a senior, and she was really excited about her experience with the Lord this weekend,
Yeah.
and was just just thrilled about what she learned and what she experienced. And so thank you for your leadership there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
the rest of the
awesome.
team and the volunteers
Yeah.
for their commitment
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
our kids in that way. So it's a big
Just
sacrifice to
something
leave
about-
your family for the weekend and
Yeah.
Yeah.
devote your time to our teens, but it's much appreciated.
Yeah, just something about getting people away on retreats that kind of gets them outside of the normal and a different experience. So it's really cool capitalizing on that and seeing
Yeah.
how God moves.
Right, and we even, I think when John was speaking, he's like, "This, what you experienced tonight, it should not be confined to just this,
Right.
just on this weekend. Like, so how can we develop a lifestyle where we don't have to go away on a weekend to be able to worship the Lord like this? You know,
Yeah.
so I think it was very thought provoking. I think kids are, if they were on like aligned, kind of like how they worship, how they see the Lord. I think a lot of just were pushed over and they're sold out for Jesus. So, really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great weekend.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm sure we'll
Great
talk a little
report,
bit
man.
more about this as
We will. It's going to
go
tie
along.
to Nehemiah 9.
Yeah.
Nehemiah 9 right here.
But we've come to that part of our Behind the Pulpit broadcast where we discuss some things that are happening in the media and in the news. All right, so there's a lot that we could talk about, but specifically, Tim, did you have anything in mind that we should highlight today? Because I don't know
did.
how to even decide.
So there's a lot of the obvious going on still, and we've talked about
The
that a
obvious
lot.
Israel, the border,
Right.
Washington.
So I thought it was in the best interest of not only us, but of our viewers and our listeners to try to find a fun, heartwarming-ish news story. So some of our audience, maybe some of our Philly sports fans audience, may know this story. But recently, there was a man who tried to bring his emotional support alligator into a Phillies game.
Whoa, okay.
His name is Wally the Alligator.
Do we have a picture of Wally?
I
that
will
we
show.
Can see?
I will
Yes.
show. I will show Wally the alligator now.
Oh goodness.
He's a 6-foot alligator, and they did not let him into the Phillies game. But Wally has an Instagram that you can go follow. It is Wally Gator Joy. He is apparently a very friendly alligator.
Wow.
He was standing online with his owner, and apparently the owner is he rescues and reinstates reptiles that have been mistreated or released into the cities. But apparently
This was a abused.
Released into the city.
he doesn't keep them as pet. Well,
Look at this alligator walking down Liberty Bell.
Well, it's the classic.
He was-
I want to get an alligator as a pet, and then it gets big, and people don't know what to do with it, so they chuck it in a sewer.
Is Wally now sitting outside of Pat's and Gino's waiting for people to throw in cheesesteaks? Or?
Maybe Johnny will see him this weekend.
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay. There you go. Watch your legs, man. He's gonna bite your leg off if you're running.
But for those of you who don't know, Johnny will be running a marathon this weekend in
be attempting
in
to.
Philly.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Sunday. 26? Oh, my goodness.
You can do that.
Wow.
See
We're
if
gonna
I
find
can.
out.
You can only run a mile, man. That's
We'll
impressive.
see. I haven't done it.
Yeah,
This
so
past
Have you
Saturday,
trained for
speaking
it, or
of
you
Philly,
just-
I've been training a little
Oh,
bit.
okay.
Yeah.
So you're just like, I'm just gonna get up there and give it a try.
I always
see what
wanted to.
happens.
so this guy he rescues reptiles, and he did an interview with NPR, and he says he doesn't keep them as pets, but Wally was special. Wally is apparently he's very sweet. There's on his Instagram. They bring him places. There's pictures
Wow.
of people giving him hugs.
Is he on a
and
leash?
He cuddling with people. He was brought into the game on a leash. He is walking.
When
on a
was
leash.
this? Like playoffs or something?
This was during the playoffs, and he actually
Which
recently
they lost. Sorry, just wanted to make sure everyone knew that.
He actually recently got into a Philadelphia Flyers game, and there's the
Wow.
Flyers mascot has its
Wow.
own Instagram, and there's a couple videos of him with Wally at the Flyers game. So, just thought it would be a fun, cool, interesting news story for you guys to
Interesting.
ponder and talk about this emotional support alligator named
Okay.
Wally.
All right.
Well,
Is he
that's
aware?
an interesting story,
Is
Tim.
he aware that down in Disney, alligators eat children? And
Right,
there's
right.
Apparently
follow
not this
through-
one.
This is the one alligator in the world that will not eat you.
There's
Wally.
pictures of him wearing sunglasses and cuddling with different children and
Cuddling with children. I'm not.
Baby
I'm still not
photos.
going near him, man. Those jaws.
it looks like he's smiling too. It's like
Is
think
he
you can
real
get-
or AI generated?
No,
That's
he's
the
very
question.
real, and there's lots of videos of him walking around with
Okay.
leashes. There's a picture of him that looks like kissing a child.
And
I once heard somebody say the school of experience is sometimes the only education a fool will attend. So maybe this is what it's going to take for old Wally to learn the hard way. Maybe that this isn't a friendly pet that's going to give you any kind of emotional support.
Fair enough.
I don't know. Maybe.
Now,
maybe I'm wrong.
what's your Christian? What does the Christian worldview tell us about?
How can we view this from a Christian lens?
Well,
Could you come up with something over there, Dave?
I would just say that
Leviathan and Job, right
because we live in a fallen world, the animals have turned against us. You know how alligators growl and dogs and bears, look at us with fear. It's because they know we're the ones who rebel against our Creator. Right?
Yeah.
So apparently he was entered into a tournament to become America's favorite pet, and he was a quarterfinalist, but that was a while ago, so I don't know if he won or not.
That's where we are in American culture today. We have alligators. It's replaced the bald eagle.
In the city of Philadelphia, this seems like an appropriate emotional
This is
support
true.
Yes.
This is just a lot of people like alligators down there that you.
Especially in sports events.
That's true.
By the way, speaking of marathons in Philadelphia, this weekend was the Rocky Run in the news on
Oh,
Saturday.
okay.
A lot of people
Okay.
down there taking pictures in front of the museum and stuff. So Philadelphia.
Wow. Okay.
Where's your marathon going to be? Is that
At
New
Philadelphia.
Jersey? Are you going
In
to Philly?
Philly. Yeah.
All right.
I think it ends at the Rocky Steps.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
I will tell you. Can I tell one story? So back when I was in college, I did make my way down to South Street one day, and I was wearing a Yankees hat.
Oh dear.
Oh my goodness! I had one guy that came up and just didn't know who I was and gave me the business about that. And it was the Eagles were playing the Giants, and I was wearing a Yankees hat, and he was still
Oh man,
chewing me out. And I said, "All right, I guess I'm taking it off."
Whoa.
they're intense.
Be careful. Be careful.
Be strong and courageous, Bob. All right, so that's our in the news.
But if I had
segment.
Wally with me, he would have taken the guy out.
Maybe so. Maybe there's something to use. Maybe it's
he's
not so
too
much
friendly.
emotional support. It's
Too
more
friendly.
like protection.
Hey, yeah,
too
at least he
supportive.
would have provided emotional support in that moment.
Well,
It's funny, the NPR article, there's a section that says why alligators aren't good emotional support.
Yeah. Yes.
Just letting people know you probably
know,
shouldn't be.
dogs.
Your average
cats,
alligator shouldn't be.
horses. I don't know. Gerbils, but alligators. I don't know. All right, so that should lead us really well into our next segment about prayer. In case you ever have a crisis in your life, like a wild beast coming after you, you're going to be turning to prayer pretty quickly, which was the subject of yesterday's message in the book of Nehemiah. Pastor Bob, Nehemiah chapter 9.
Nehemiah
What was
9.
going on there?
All right. Prayer, man. So I was just thinking, so Johnny was talking about the youth retreat and hours of worship. And if you read through Nehemiah 9, one of the things that you're going to see is that this is basically a condensed version of a 3 or 4 hour prayer service that they had after they
Like a
heard from
quarter of a
God's word.
day, it
Quarter
says.
of a
Wow.
day, and then the math most people were saying worked out to about 3 or 4 hours the actual service. But so we talked a little bit about prayer. And the main question I kind of asked was, how's your prayer life? And a lot of people, I think if you're talking with them, many people will say, I can get disciplined at reading the Bible. I can get disciplined at praying for people and even disciplined at memorizing Scripture. But when it comes to your prayer life, so often I hear people say, that's the one part I struggle with. And so we kind of played a little bit around with that question for the message yesterday. There's some AI tools for prayer, and we talked about how that might not be the best thing for you to do. You can download the iBip app, I Believe in Prayer, give you auto-generated prayers daily. So we talked a little bit about why we don't pray, what are the barriers, and then we talked in Nehemiah 9 about 4 things you need for authentic prayer. And the 4 things were... right from the text, the right preparation, the right posture, the right perspective, and then you can get to the right petition. And the problem that many of us have is we run right to the petition and we're very demanding, and we don't do all the heart work behind that. So that was kind of what we unpacked for the message. Yesterday there was some fasting, there was some sackcloth, there was some dirt on your heads. There was some icy hearts and how we warm those up and all of that. So, and then at the end, I found this really amazing illustration about marriage. So we'll talk about that in a second. So what questions do you have? What questions are you bringing to the table?
Yeah, it was a great message. I thought it was a good encouragement to continue to pray. What are some of those reasons why we don't pray? I remember you had mentioned a few of them in the beginning. What are some of those barriers that prevent us from taking advantage of
I gave a couple
this
examples
resource?
at the beginning and then talked about a few throughout, but I think three that I've heard a lot are, number one, we question whether God hears our prayers because they don't get answered as we think they should. Number two, we don't pray because we don't want to be truly known. So it's a little vulnerable to come to God in prayer. If we admit to Him our thoughts, our desires, our sins, it can be shameful for us, even though God knows us inside and out. And then thirdly, we don't do it because we just don't sense a need for it. That many people live lives self-sufficiently, especially in the Northeast.
Yep.
So those were three things I kind of talked about at the beginning. I think there's more that we talked about throughout, but those were three to get people's minds started. So, would you guys add anything to that? Is that a good capture? Have you heard those before, or am I missing something here?
I also think that a lot of people have never really been taught how to pray. I feel like it's one of those things you just kind of like listen to maybe other people pray, but it's never like, like if you're teaching someone how to train a tire, you're not just going to like do it and just have them stand there necessarily. And you could, and some people may learn by experience and just watching, but I think some people need to be like verbally told, like, hey, this is kind of how you pray. Like this is, when you're changing a tire, take this tool, go here, do this, and have them see it, do it with you. So I think prayer, especially even within the church, I had a teen ask me recently, how do you pray? And it was really refreshing. I can't say how many times I've ever really been asked that question before. So I do think there is an aspect of verbally walking alongside someone and teaching them how to pray.
Well, good. Funny that you mentioned that, because in the second part we did talk about that. I said that was another barrier that we pray. I don't know how to pray. I don't know what to do.
Right.
And we talked a little bit about the Lord's Prayer and how Jesus teaches us how to pray and gives us a form.
Yeah.
In fact, can I mention that quote? I thought this was a great quote from this guy John Bombaro, talking about the Lord's Prayer. So you missed this, Johnny. I'm going to read this for you.
All right.
He said, "The Lord's Prayer frees us from the tyranny of spiritual creativity and allows us to rest in the confidence of something certain and true. Instead of fabricating something snappy to garner God's attention, Jesus would have us lose all such originality and simply plagiarize Him at the invitation of the Lord Himself." So, there you go.
Yeah.
The Lord's
That's
Prayer
good.
can provide for me, I think it was Martin Luther, maybe this is from
Framework.
the Westminster Confession, but a good structure for the prayers. Like you can say a clause and then
you-
kind of
right.
expand on whatever that clause is talking about.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to think about it. I think the tension with what you're saying for me is Jesus also taught not to do vain repetition. Right? So you don't want to just go on babbling like the pagans, just saying certain words because you think these are the right words. And I think sometimes the Lord's Prayer could be misused in that way, that people just think, I just have to say this prayer like this or say this Hail Mary, and it can become that, but it doesn't have to become that.
Yeah,
It's a matter of
that's
the
a
heart.
barrier for some folks. How do you do that from your heart in a way that it's authentic? Is at least part of what we talked about.
So the title of your message, Authentic.
4 components of authentic prayer.
Right. So can we just talk about what's the opposite? What's an inauthentic prayer?
Artificial.
Yeah. Speaking of artificial, you had mentioned that AI can help generate prayers for you, right? So what would be an example of me being inauthentic in my prayer life? Like I think about the first question you asked about God didn't answer me the way I wanted him to, so then therefore I'm going to stop petitioning because I don't really want to take no for an answer.
Yeah.
And I don't really like when God says no. So that's not really an authentic prayer, that if I'm praying this and then I'm expecting or demanding God to answer in my way, that I'm not really authentically seeking him about this and asking the God of the universe to come down and answer how he sees fit, right? That's more inauthentic. That's just more like this is a genie in the bottle kind of thing. I just want you to do what I want you to do, right? Rather than asking God and looking for him for wisdom. What are some other ways that prayer could be inauthentic as opposed to...
Well, I think you hit on the idea of the rote stuff. It definitely is a danger that you can just get into. I'm just praying to go through the motions to accomplish things and not really letting down you still have a wall between you and God. Like, I'm just going to do this to satisfy this, but it's not really me wanting to truly and fully connect with the Lord. That can be a barrier to authenticity. The other thing is that kind of what we talked about throughout, and you were just getting at, is this idea that we kind of run to a petition with entitlement behind it. God, give me, impress me, and it's all about us rather than wanting to actually go and seek Him. The way that we can be truly known is seeing ourselves rightly before God, and when we ask for God with wrong motives, like what James 4 talks about, we're not seeing ourselves as we truly are. We're almost coming to God like we're God, like God is my servant and I'm God, and that's a barrier to really authentically connecting with Him.
Can I ask you about the perspective piece, the third movement?
Please do.
So that was somewhat summarized. You weren't able to read the whole time. Nehemiah 9 is long.
It's long.
We hope
It's
you'll
long.
read that alone. It's worthy of your consideration. But
Yes.
what was the perspective that Nehemiah or Ezra had as they were going through kind of the history? What was the point of all that in terms of a prayer? Why was that section there, and what can we learn from them by imitating that section? What was going on? What's the perspective?
Yeah,
part?
well, I mean, the thing we talked about in the message is that to get the right perspective, it's important to see and remember what God has done in history and what He's done in our lives. I don't know about you guys, but there's so many times that I'm going through something and I'm praying and asking the Lord for help, and 5 seconds later, even when He answers, even when He shows up in a way that I didn't think He should, I'm thinking, is it going to happen again?
Yeah, right.
God, you
Right.
you did that, but
Yeah.
you can't do this, right? And it always, what does Martin Luther say? It always kind of curves back in on yourself. It's always back to me, like, what's my problem? So rather than, and I'm looking at my own ability, like I tend to go back and say, well, okay, I know God did that, but now I really need to work in order to accomplish what's coming up. So the point of that movement was really to talk about the history, and they walk through all the things that God did, from choosing Abraham to the Exodus to leading people into the Promised Land with Joshua and the giving of the law and all these things that God did. And even despite their stubbornness, even despite them turning away from God, God is still the theme that gets repeated as He is a God who is gracious and merciful, abounding in steadfast love. He did not forsake them. He was with them the whole time. So that I think when you can see that God is working even despite all those things, that can shift your perspective, that He can actually do what He says He can do.
And I mean, we can look back upon history, like biblical history, and see all that God has done and remember, but we can also look back upon our own personal lives.
Yes.
Like for me, yesterday or last week, or what God did last year. I don't have to go all the way back to Exodus or even, Jesus. I can see that God is faithful recently for me, right?
Yeah.
That's a way of, that gives me a perspective.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
It does. So let me give you an illustration. What actually would have fit in the message, but you just made me think about it. So there's a book that I picked up at that Westminster conference that we went to. Don't remember if I told you about this. It's a book called The Moon is Always Round. It's a kid's book. And actually, I've heard some other people picking it up recently. So Johnny Gibson, who's a professor at Westminster, he and his wife had a child, and then their second child was stillborn, didn't survive. And this book is a kid's book, kind of walking through that experience, and the theme that's repeated is the moon is always round. So he's talking to his son about, oh, look, the moon is crescent tonight. The moon is a half moon. It's a gibbous moon. And it changes shape. And what the repetition that the kid says his dad keeps saying is the moon is always round, even if you can't see all of it. And so at the end, the point of that catechism basically that he came up with was to say the moon is always round. What does that mean? It means God is always good, despite what you walk through, and even though you can't see everything. And so the reason I'm mentioning that is because, yes, God, we can look at biblical history, but we can also look at our own lives and see how God works and how God was with us and how God walked us through difficult times, even though we couldn't see the whole picture.
Yeah. That's good stuff. So check it out. The Moon is Always Round.
The Moon is Always Round.
Maybe we can link that in the comments.
My kids want to listen to it every night now.
Oh, it's an audio.
Zoe says, no. Well, listen to me read
Oh,
it.
listen to
Right,
Dad
right.
read it. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
my,
It's better than an
Zoe's
audiobook.
always like, I want Moon. I want Moon. We have 2 Moon books. I want
cool
this
choices.
Moon book.
All right, so I'll direct the next question to Johnny. So the fourth part of the sermon had to do with petition, and one of the things Bob mentioned just now is like we feel self-sufficient.
Yep.
So we don't really think we need him. And you and I were talking earlier a little bit about like when do you let God sort of lead, and when do you let the plans that
Yeah.
you have.
Yeah.
So when am I going to depend on what I thought I should be doing and prepared, and like I'm ready to go with this thing, and then when do I say, Lord, you can take this? I think there's maybe a balance here. Like I don't want to be sloppy and unprepared, and then say, Lord, bless my lack of preparation.
Yes.
I don't think that's what we want, but at the same time, I think we can self-sufficiently want to grasp control a little too much and say, okay, Lord, I have all this prepared. Now bless what I've prepared. No, don't do what you want to do. I want you to bless this thing that I've done. And we get kind of maybe a little bit too narrow in our thinking about how to approach God. So I wonder if you could speak to that and how that tied into your youth retreat weekend. And like we're prepared, but we're not going to be too self-sufficient. We're also going to let God guide us a little bit. So how did that play itself out?
Yeah. I mean, I think, when anything comes into place of extremism, I feel like rarely extremism doesn't play out well in a lot of things in life. And so if you play an extremism of, like you said, like, all right, just not going to plan anything. Like if I went into Friday with no plans, that would be tough. That I think often draws confusion and questioning of what's taking place. And I think also, as you said, the opposite end, if we've experienced that, we may draw to the other side, which is strict, like plans, times, to a point of which could also actually cause confusion and chaos in addition, which I've experienced actually when you're too like, all right, we got to move from here to here. People feel uncomfortable because it's too rushed, or feel stressed to keep a certain deadline with certain things. So I like to say you hold your plans loosely, so definitely do your due diligence, plan it. Like we spent hours last week, phone calls, getting stuff ready, and we did a lot of it, but we didn't do a lot of it. God had some other plans, and in those moments, I think there's a peace of mind knowing, hey, we're actually going to worship for a couple more hours instead of doing this other event and game we had planned, and we just felt at peace that that's what the Lord wanted us to do, and everybody just went along. They felt like that was where God wanted us to be in that moment. So I think you pray through it too. I don't think you just, you don't make an irrational decision during the planning process, and I don't think you make an irrational decision during the actual process. So I think if you're constantly depending on the Lord when you're planning, even during that night, just pray it like, God, what should we do now? Right? Like we had this thing planned, but this is going on. Like, and we prayed. So Lord, what do you want us to do now? And I think it was a really incredible experience that weekend to see that take place and to see the Lord bless that. And it was really, really cool.
It's a good model of this dependency thing we're talking about. So we don't want to be too self-sufficient and pretend like we can manufacture this experience that God wants his people to have. We had to totally yield our plans in his hands. So I think it's kind of that balance in ministry. There's planning that's valid, and then there's just prayerfully depending upon God's Spirit leading that's valid too.
Yeah. It's very humbling too. Very humbling. Like you said, instead of being self-sufficient, like I can't walk away and say, oh, you did such a great job getting that weekend ready and all that stuff. I'm like, I didn't plan half of that stuff.
That's the thing.
God did it all. I was just blessed to be there, to be honest. So, really neat.
Yeah.
God get the glory.
Amen.
When that's in the end, actually kind of the point we ended the message on was that authentic prayer gets you to a place where you just say, Lord, I need you, and it's about your glory. Like authentic prayer shows the glory of the Lord because you realize you're depending upon him.
Yeah.
So
even like during the one powerful night, like one of our leaders came up. It was just like, God's so awesome. Like not the people leading worship, not the the speaker, like, oh, like the speaker made this happen or the worship made it happen, but God's awesome. And that's I think we all walked away from that night all saying that. So we'll remember that.
Yeah. Just a little thing. I think, Bob, you would agree. Like if there's a sermon that is good, it's nice if you let us know about that. But man, it's great if people walk away with the thought about God
Yeah,
being awesome.
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like
Right.
I'm kind of over the good sermon thing. Like I'm glad it was a good sermon, but
Right.
what do you believe about God as a result of this
Amen.
text and this
Was
image?
Jesus more beautiful to you as
Yeah.
a result of hearing Matt?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about, speaking of beautiful, the wedding imagery that you had used?
Oh
there in
yeah.
the
So let me
message?
say that because
Yeah.
it was kind of a transitory illustration to get us to this coming week. But so I picked up the Nehemiah for You, that series from the Good Book Company.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So Eric Mason happened to write the one on Nehemiah, and he's got this really good illustration there about a wedding, and talking about about a covenant, the covenant of the wedding. And so he says, you know what, just at the I should say this, at the end of Nehemiah 9, chapter 9, verse 38, it talks about how their response to all of this was to make a firm covenant, to renew their covenant with the Lord. And so his illustration was to say, you know, it's the same thing with us and God. So he says, picture a wedding, you know. So you got a man and a woman who get up to the altar, and you know they go through that. But until you get to the altar, there's all these different things you do, you know. So you say, I love you. You decide to get married. You go through premarital counseling. You're released from that, and then you start making preparations for the day. You send out the invitations. You get the dresses and the suits. You get the preacher. You send out all of that stuff, and then you finally get to the altar, and you're up there, and you both say, I do. And then you go to the reception, and then you dance, and you make speeches, and you celebrate. And just imagine after all that work, however long it is, 8, 9, 10 months, a year, getting ready for that celebration, you go back, you fall asleep, and then the bride and the groom wake up the next day, look at each other and say, man, that was a great day. And then they get up and walk away and never talk to each other again. And Eric Mason's thing is, isn't that weird? Wouldn't that be weird?
Yeah.
He said, but that's what people do with Jesus.
Right.
We do all this work, we get up there, and then we live as if we didn't ask Jesus into our heart. Like, it's great that you walked down an aisle. It's great that you said you want to give your life to Jesus. It's great that you went on a retreat and you cried and you raised your hands and you did all that stuff. But then if it doesn't make any difference in the way you live the rest of your life, that's not the point. Because too many people act like, I walked an aisle, I got insurance, I'm good. And it makes no difference in your life. So his point is that it should be that God is wooing us, that Jesus is so beautiful. We're falling in love with him. We want to pursue him. We're pursuing him in prayer, right?
Yeah.
That is what should totally transform us, that we actually are wanting to keep the covenant with him. And that's kind of what the last section is about. They have this kind of ending of this covenant renewal ceremony, but I thought it tied in really well with the whole prayer idea of, are we really wanting to be in God's presence? And of course, the definition of prayer is offering up your desires unto God, right?
Yeah.
Pouring out your hearts to God is really what prayer is. The catechisms tell us. I had a lot of people come up and say to me they really appreciated that last illustration.
Yeah.
I read it and I thought, that's a good illustration. I got to use that.
Yeah.
Any relationship is going to grow through communication. So we would encourage you to continue to grow your relationship with the Lord through communication. And that's what prayer is.
Don't be weird.
Yes.
Right.
Don't be weird.
That's
How about
powerful.
that for the Behind the Pulpit title? All right. So anything else about
is
the
a good
message
title. Don't
on
be
prayer
weird.
today, guys? We're
Hey,
good?
go pray.
Yes.
And pray for a long time.
Yes. Amen. A quarter of a day. All right. So our next segment of Behind the Pulpit is where we do a theology sprint. So, Tim.
Not a marathon. It's a sprint.
Just
Okay.
a sprint.
We got a runner here at the table. I don't know if he's up
Yeah.
for it, but
Dash out.
he's been working out.
Got to sprint before you can run.
So this is something I've heard some people talking about, and something that I feel like is something that warps a lot of people's minds.
This is an interesting preface right
Yes.
here. Dave's eyes getting wide.
including my
I'm
own
about to unwarp
sometimes.
you right now.
So, Dave, if you would unwarp the minds of many,
He said,
and,
We'll give you some
All
help.
right.
Don't worry.
and somehow
Good.
Not rewarp. Not continue to warp.
yeah, I'll twist it up even worse.
to de-warp the concepts and the truth that although we worship.
Is there a question in here, Tim?
Hi, Bob. You know what? I was just about to ask. The whole we worship one God, but it's split up into three persons, and how that is still considered one God when it feels like sometimes we're speaking or talking to three different people. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Do you want to use your superhero analogies from the membership class? Jesus being Thor and the Hulk,
I
and
feel like I've had some people asking me that, and I've seen a lot on social media and some comments on things, and my mind wrestles with it sometimes too.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's de-warp.
You want me to do this one, or you guys want? He said,
What-
Dave.
can you
Say
kick it off?
Dave.
Can you kick it off, and then this would be a good one for like that longer format thing. So, you want
Okay.
to kick it off, and then we can maybe do a longer discussion here.
Okay.
Kick it.
All right. So, I mean, I guess what I would say is we are monotheistic. And we also believe that God is reasonable. We don't believe that this is a logical inconsistency. We don't think that God's bending the rules of our rationality in order to be Trinitarian. But we have to use some categories that maybe aren't everyday type of categories. So what we would say is God is one in essence and three in persons. So an essence or a substance, sometimes you hear that, an essence or a substance. That is this idea of what is God? What sort of a thing? Like this microphone is a thing. Like, what is this? Right? This is a microphone. I could also, if the camera can see this, I could also say, what is this? And the
What is
correct
that?
answer to that question is
I don't
this
know.
is a human being, right? That's the substance or the essence of what this is.
Yeah.
But I could also say, who is this? And that wouldn't apply to a microphone. But if I said, who is this over here? Then that would say, that's Johnny, is our director of youth, young adult, and production, right? So God, in essence, in the whatness, is one in essence, but in person, God is three. So God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit. So we believe there is one God who exists eternally in three separate yet co-equal persons, Father, Son, and Spirit.
Good. So, one of the things I think that trips people up is that the word Trinity is not in the Bible.
Right.
So we're giving a theological language to a concept that's in there. I had somebody come up to me the other week asking me, like for some reason he was reading Genesis 1:26 and 27. And he asked me, is that where Jesus is mentioned in the Old Testament? And I said, most theologians see that we're created in, let us make God in our own image, is what
Make
theologian,
man in our
let's make man in our own image, is what theologians call the royal we. It's an allusion to the Trinity in the Old Testament. So we see these allusions throughout, and then in a lot of Paul's letters, he's grouping together Father, Son, Spirit, this Trinitarian language that's going on there.
So the royal we is when a king speaks in the third person plural, even though he's the only person speaking. Like we are going to instruct you in this way, when really it's just the king talking. Right. So that was a common way for people who reigned on thrones to speak, and it's still I think you can hear that from more royal societies. But is there an allusion there to the plurality inside of the divine being? Perhaps.
Yeah.
It's unclear. But it fits there. Any thoughts from the youth director on the Trinity here?
You nailed it. Nailed it on the head.
Okay.
Well, maybe also just saying that in the person, in the economy of the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Spirit, when it applies to salvation, I think a helpful thing is that I've heard people talk about how God the Father is the architect of salvation. The Son is the one who earned salvation, and then the Holy Spirit is the one who applies it. So they have different roles, even though they're co-equal in terms of what they do, throughout history and specifically in salvation.
Right. So big word in terms of ontology. There's a unity, a oneness, and then in terms of functionality, there's a distinctness in terms of the roles that they play. Yeah.
And I had somebody else tell me one time, see if you agree with this. Somebody else say one time that only the Christian God can be truly loving, because he exists in community. The Father, the Son, the Spirit, perfectly loving and caring for one another. So he does not create us because he needs us. He creates us for his glory. And so there's a very much uniqueness to the Christian God because of the Trinitarian concept.
Yeah. I mean, for love to exist, there has to be a subject and an object.
Right.
So the Trinity is, they call it perichoresis, where they are divinely
Forgot
dancing
the technical term of
around
that, yes.
with one another in love for forever. So
Thank you for pulling out the Greek there.
Well, I don't know. This is the theology sprint
That's
section
right.
where
This
we
is
can
time.
use those big
There we go.
words.
All right.
Yeah. So hopefully that clarifies things. Tim, what do you think?
Sounded good. I just the one I forget who
Is
asked
that
me this.
unwarped at all, or did I rewarp it?
Oh, you unwarped.
I shoved it in there.
I forget who asked me this, but one of my friends was asking me once the whole concept of how Jesus says he's seated at the right hand of the throne of God, and they're like, "Isn't it supposed to be one God? How can he be seated next to himself?" Sort of a. I did not know how to answer that.
Well, he's
question.
not seated next to himself. He's seated next to the Father.
That's right.
So, yeah, that would be a good
Right hand of
example
the
of the
Father.
threeness, not the oneness, and that those thrones are not the same thrones. So, yeah, I think it's a. I see the New Testament church. The apostles didn't use the word Trinity. They didn't have this concept fully framed out.
Where was it?
Yet.
Was formulated at
Council of
Nicaea or Constantinople? I'm forgetting.
Nicaea was really a direct answer to Arianism, and it very much proclaimed the deity of Christ over
Yes,
and against
okay.
the concept that
You just
Jesus
did this whole
was
church
somehow
history
created.
class, so it's fresh in your mind.
Right. The Chalcedonian Creed
There we go.
really nailed down, I think, the Trinity once and for all. But I don't think we want to say that the apostles and the church fathers were not understanding that God was both three and one, because they were all.
Right.
Let's just say if you were there on the shores of the Jordan at Jesus' baptism and you experienced that, you saw the sun in the water, you saw the voice booming from heaven, and then you saw this dove
There
descending.
you go. Perfect
You
example.
had threeness, you had oneness. You didn't have the
Yep.
word Trinity, you didn't have that concept nailed down, but you were experientially beginning to understand God is three in one.
Yeah.
So there was events like that that needed some time for us to process and unwarp the realities of what we experienced there in the life of Jesus. And so it took the church fathers a while to create these creeds, but eventually they got it down.
That's right. One last thing I will add, as Tim likes to say, he loved your phrase one time. You got to dig into a creed, which I have been. If you read all the creeds, Apostles, Nicaea, Athanasian Creed, all of them emphasize the Trinitarian nature of God.
Right. Yeah. So that's what we believe. So hey, great show today, guys. Thanks for all the good feedback and back and forth here. I hope you guys enjoyed Behind the Pulpit for today. Look for that Underground Sessions footage and dig deep into one of those as well. But until we see you next time, have a great rest of your day.